All right, here we go. Now we're recording. Okay. um, this is Friday. Today's Friday, February 26th, and this is another live video on George's Space Chat. Welcome. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all doing everything you can to stay safe and sane, as difficult as that may seem at times. But here we are. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to have you all back. Let me just take a quick peek and see if... Oh, there we go. We already got 7 people watching. Wow. Give me a like in the comments or send me a comment. Let me know who I'm talking to. It always makes it a little easier not to feel so all alone out here. Anyway, I hope you're all well, as I said. A little bit of housekeeping here. Gareth Hughes, what's going on? Good to see you. Chris Rogers, I see you. You know, Chris Rogers, I try to look good. Doing my best, doing the best I can. Joey, West Coast, what's going on? Good to see you. Happy end of February to you, my friend. Darcel, good to see you. Jimmy McGear, good to see you. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all, weathering the storms that we are living through right now. Jose, good to see you, my friend. All right, so a little bit of housekeeping before we go into today's subject of this live video. There are, with the month of March, there are exactly 3 great live videos coming up. And let me see, where did I put my schedule? There it is. On March, let's see, March 12th, I am doing a live video and I will feature the amazing Ron Jenkins. If anybody in New York knows who Ron Jenkins is, and he's a bad dude, he's a bad bass player. I highly recommend you check this dude out. I certainly learned a whole lot listening to him and continue to be inspired by him. He's one of my favorite bass players, no doubt. Then we have a very special live video on March 19th, which I'm doing together with the great drummer Ulysses Owens Jr. And Ulysses is a good friend of mine. He's a fantastic drummer, longtime drummer with Christian McBride. I don't believe that he currently plays with him, but probably in some form. Nevertheless, we are doing a live video together that will focus on the drums and bass hookup. All right, and the idea behind this is to feature, each one of us is going to come up with 5 drum and bass combinations of one, drummer and a bass player, and perhaps give our analysis or talk about why this particular set of players is so important to us. So I'm very excited about that. I don't know what Ulysses is going to bring. He doesn't know what I'm going to bring, and it's going to be a good time. All right, and then to end out the month of March, I'm going to do a live video with my good friend and amazing bass player Ted Gould, all the way from New Orleans. And Ted is just a great representation of the sound of that city. I am a big fan of the city of New Orleans. I'm a big fan of the music that comes out of that city. And this is sort of my attempt to recreate a lesson that I actually took 3-4 years ago with Ted, where I happened to be, he was living in the Bay Area at the time in Oakland, and I was there on a tour, and I contacted him with the request for a lesson about the New Orleans sound, because I wanted to get more information about that. And I got a lesson from him, and it has stayed with me ever since. Plus, we're going to talk about the various benefits of potato chips. That's an inside joke. Anyway, so that's what's coming up. Towards the end of March, there is going to be another George's Bass workshop. And I will start promoting that next week. this time, first of all, many thanks to the participants of the last bass workshop, which was in January of this year. It was a great time. It was 3 hours of intense work on one song, and I certainly hope that all the participants got their money's worth and got good information out of it. It was great to do it. I had a great time. I hope that everybody else had a great time as well. But once again, the bass workshop, just to give you a little bit of an idea what this is all about, this is my attempt, I guess, to let you in on my creative process, and in the course of that, perhaps inspire you to seek out various bits of information that perhaps can help your playing with, especially when it comes to presented material, material that comes from a source material that is presented in written form, or sometimes in audio form. So in other words, this is a workshop about how to go beyond reading a piece of paper with some music in front of you, and really go into interpreting and finding the means to play the right thing at the right time, with the right phrasing, with the right dynamics, and most importantly, perhaps with the right intent. So that is coming up towards the end of March. I don't have the exact date yet, but again, stay tuned. I am going to put that up. I'm going to start promoting that next week. And that's pretty much it. My little disclaimer right off the top is, if you want to reach out to me concerning recording, if you want to reach out to me concerning teaching, please use the email address george@georgefarmer.com. It's the easiest way to get in touch with me. And if you want to contribute to the cause, I put my Venmo and PayPal information into the description of this video as well. I certainly appreciate all the contributions that have happened in the past, and there's nothing too small and there's nothing too large. So there you go. That's all the housekeeping that I have for today. And with that in mind, let me get into the subject of today's live video. Now, this is entitled Der Auersberg. And for those who know, and for those who don't know, I have had a fantastic teacher in my life. And I'm talking about the great Professor Johannes Auersberg back in Vienna. And today I am attempting to talk about Auersberg, who has profoundly influenced my entire life and my career. My guest today on this live video is my study colleague, Tim Dunin, who started with Auersberg at the same time as I did. And when I say at the same time, I do mean it at the same time. We auditioned together for that spot to study with Auersberg many years ago back in Austria. So Tim was there from the very, very beginning, and has now, Auersberg has passed on in, I believe, 2018. And Tim and was already retired from teaching at the time. And Tim was slated and has taken up the job of keeping Auersberg's teaching alive at the Academy of Music, where he is now I guess you could call him the chair of the bass department. I don't know. It's difficult to translate these functions, but excuse me. So Tim is now teaching where Auersberg used to teach. Tim also was he auditioned and won for principal bass player of the Viennese Philharmonic Orchestra, and I believe he's going to get into it in more detail, but I believe that he was working with the Philharmonic Orchestra for some time as well. So I'm very, very excited about today's episode, about today's live video. Auersberg meant the world to me. it's one of those once in a lifetime connections, once in a lifetime situations. He was my teacher, and he became my friend. Um, he definitely influenced me greatly. I owe him a debt of gratitude that's gonna go on for as long as I'm around. Um, so also probably a little bit of a disclaimer. If you see me getting misty today, that's probably gonna happen. There's just no two ways about that. This particular gentleman had the courage to admit this player to his class, and at a time where he didn't need to, and all of that. And I don't want to give too much of it away because we're going to get into it, in the conversation with Tim. But it's a lot of that is based on the difference in schooling that you have. Difference in Austrian schooling versus the American schooling system. Just to give you a quick analysis, in Austria at the time, you had to audition for a spot to learn with a particular teacher at the Academy of Music. All of the education is free, so it is really on the teacher to admit you to his roster of students or not. And needless to say, this is we're talking about classical music here, and Austria and Vienna being what it is, there are many students who want to learn, and it falls on the teacher to pick the ones that they think are most sympathetic to their teachings. Auersp picked me after a year-long waiting, and that meant the world to me, and continues to mean the world to me. So with that in mind, let me get Tim on this call right now, and perhaps start the conversation right there. All right, so let's see if this works. All right. Tim Dunin, what's going on?
Hey, George.
How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm so glad to see you, man.
Yeah, likewise.
It's been a minute. It's unbelievable. So just so you know, we are live on Facebook right now. We have a number of people watching us. Let's see. Oh yeah, we got a good amount of people right here. And I just gave the audience somewhat of an introduction to our history together, to the fact that we started with Auersberg at the same time. And I also gave the audience somewhat of a rundown of what we are attempting to do today, which is talk about this amazing teacher who I think it's fair to say profoundly influenced both of us, and kind of see that as an example of why have a teacher in the first place, and what a good teacher really can do. Because I think he's the best example that I can think of. Of someone who really had an influence on his students in the best possible way. So let me open the floor to you. What was your introduction to Auersberg?
My introduction to us, well, I missed all of your introduction and your follow-ups. I don't know what kind of information you've already been given.
That's totally, don't even worry about it.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
irrelevant.
Let's hope there's a lot of people out there with substance abuse that can't remember much longer than a minute. So I actually met Auersberg in Australia when
Okay.
I was a teenager.
Okay.
And I was studying at the School of Music.
Okay.
And he came out on a kind of tour, like I think he was doing some solo stuff, but mostly master classes.
Okay.
And that's where I met him. I can't unfortunately remember exactly what year it was or how old I was, but I think I was still at school.
Right.
So it would have been around 1986 or something like that.
Okay.
And of
And
course
you
was very impressed,
and
very inspired by him as a person and as a teacher.
right. And
And
you are originally from Australia. Just to, I did not mention that to the audience.
okay, yeah, I'm
You're
from Canberra. I'm from Canberra, Australia. Yeah.
okay. Okay.
And so that's where we first met, and I was very inspired by his work. Um, and then I went on to study at the School of Music in the bachelor course. Finished there. My teacher Max, just as a little bit of background, why coming to Austria at all, was my teacher Max in Australia studied with Streicher.
Mm.
And he was always pushing me during my degree in Australia, during my studies there, to go to Austria and to further my studies once I'd finished.
Right.
But I was sort of tossing it up with Berlin or Vienna, Austria. Wasn't quite sure, and then actually thought I'd like to go and study with Posh, with Auersp.
Right.
Who was also an ex-student for the punters out there. Of Auersp, and where he probably his most famous student because he became principal bass at the Vienna Phil at a very young age.
Right.
But I also got in touch with Auersp and sent him a recording. And then, or let's just call him Johannes. That would be nice.
Right. Of course.
And sent him a recording and said I already told him that I was also looking at possibly studying with Alois, and he just wrote back saying Alois doesn't have a position right now, but on the recording and the way I remember you, you're more than welcome. Come. And so that was that.
Right.
You know, and it was probably the best, almost coincidental, not quite, but almost the best. Almost coincidental best choice I could have made because it couldn't have gone better for me.
Right. No,
it really worked out to be because we became very good friends and like-minded in so many things. Right. And so I came here, spent a few days in Vienna, and then came to Oberschützen.
Yeah.
Like,
What is
I don't know
this?
how much of you. I don't know how much have you explained already about.
No, I haven't gotten into the whole thing with Oberschützen and Vienna, and that it's an hour and a half outside of Vienna and all of that. It for the sake of keeping it simple,
of course,
I kind of just said the Academy of Music because that's what people can understand over here.
Yep.
That certainly makes sense.
I think it does. It is important to, when talking about Giannis, just a little bit about the details there.
Oh yeah,
is that it's a small village, south of Vienna, about an hour and a half's drive, as you said, about halfway between Graz and Vienna.
Yes.
And it's a department of the Graz University, but it's a different campus, basically.
Right.
And it's a good place to isolate yourself and work on your thing because it's a small village. And back then, there was like one pub and the uni.
And that was it.
And that was it, man.
There is nothing else there. Like the one.
Now there's almost less.
Wow.
Okay. But, the pub's gone. Eastie's gone. Yeah, no, killed the nightlife there. Killed it. But the famous Oberschützen nightlife. But it's a small village and it's a place to really isolate and focus on your thing. And I thought that's exactly what I want to do. And my thing was also about, I was studying in Australia, finished my studies and was kind of a little bit of I don't want to, but that's the way it sort of felt at the time, kind of a little bit of a big fish in a small sea.
Right.
And so I thought but I'm not happy with what I'm doing. I might have been good enough to get a job there, like in an orchestra, but at the time, but I thought, no, I'm not comfortable with what I'm doing yet. And I just want to further myself. And I didn't know whether I was going to be a year or 2 years, or I had a few different ideas, but I had no plans. No plans at all. And it just kept getting better. And so I came there, and at first I was like actually, I realized in the aftermath in a bit of a depression because I didn't speak a word of German. I was in this
You
small
didn't.
village.
That's right. That's right. Nothing. No German whatsoever.
No.
Yeah, because we were there the day that the two of us auditioned.
Well, when I came to Auersp, I didn't even know the audition was in Graz.
That's
Someone told me,
crazy.
said, you've got to go to Graz. I was like, why? So,
Just for the audience to give you like a picture of what happened during this audition. Okay, so we are there in Graz at the Academy of Music, and I just did my audition, and I feel pretty good about it. Everything went well, and there's this lanky dude approaching me with a mullet. Did you have a mullet at the time?
I had hair down to my ass, mate.
Okay, so this dude is approaching me and says, "Listen, we're playing upright bass. We're playing classical upright bass, and in Austria, you're sitting down when you're playing, right? So not exclusively, but at that point, that's what we were doing. And as such, I had a stool with me. I had something to sit down.
That's
That was
right.
that that
I just assumed there was going to be a stall there, and there wasn't.
Well, there wasn't. So this lanky dude approaches me and said, "Hey, mate, can I use your stool?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, whatever. I'm done. Like, I'm good for now. Of course, go ahead, take it." So that's how it started. You go ahead, take it away from there.
Well, yeah, and so that's how it started.
Mm-hmm.
And there I was, sort of by myself in the student college there. Well, actually, not by myself. Living in a student college is quite the opposite of being by yourself.
Yeah. You're not
It's
alone.
almost like a communist regime. Nothing
Yeah.
belongs to you. Don't leave anything of any worth in the fridge.
Yeah, it's gonna be gone.
And and so, but very few people spoke English. I had a couple of students there that helped me out and stuff.
Right.
Auersper's English was amazing for his age.
Yeah.
Considering his generation.
Yeah.
But I think I kind of fell into a bit of a depression and then was a bit homesick and stuff in the first semester or the first few months and stuff. But particularly because when I got there, like going back to sort of like feeling like a bit of a big fish in a small sea, I got there and there were all these cats, right? Like Martin Kappers,
Right.
Simon Jäger, Georg Strake,
Yeah.
may he rest in peace.
Yeah.
And Helmut Stockhammer,
Oh, yeah.
They were all at the top of their game, and
Yeah.
I was listening to these guys playing in the lessons and stuff. And I just got immediately depressed. I just thought, these guys are all around the same age as me, and they're just so much further. I will never get anywhere close to this in 10 years,
Yeah.
And so I was a bit depressed by that in the beginning. But then I sorted myself out and thought, no, I always made sure I had the first lesson in the day when he was in Auersp. Most of these guys weren't in Auersp like yourself.
Right. Yeah. We would come there, do our lessons, or we would do the lessons with Johannes at his home in Vienna.
Right.
So it was, but unless you had some additional classes, meaning ear training, harmony, history, whatever, you wouldn't necessarily stay in Oberschützen.
And then he would give the course in February, right?
Right.
He'd always give his courses, and that's when everybody would come together.
Yes. Yeah.
All the people that lived in different places.
Yeah.
And I would listen to these guys and just, how am I going to reach this, But I thought, no, grab as many opportunities as possible to listen to the other lessons. So I always made sure I had the first lesson.
Yeah.
On the Wednesdays, it was always a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And so that I could relax and listen to all of the other lessons.
Right.
And for those that's listening that may or may not study classical, but in Austria, it's quite normal that everybody can listen to the lesson. So it's almost like every lesson is like a masterclass.
Right. So let me just jump in here because this is a good segue to my introduction to Johannes, which was one of the courses or one of the clinics that he did in February, right? I finished high school, and then, I sort of made the decision, okay, I want to get into playing upright bass. Up through high school, I had not studied upright bass. I barely touched an instrument, period. Okay. So I went and got through a school colleague of mine. I got private lessons with Mario Schott. I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Yes,
but
yes.
he's
Yep.
at the Volksoper,
Yep.
and you know, started taking private lessons with Mario Schott, and with the eye on, okay, how can I further this education, right? Um, Completely naive and completely oblivious to the fact that everybody who studies at the Academy of Music already has almost a lifetime of study behind them. Like they
Mm.
start when they're 6 and they stay with their instrument, and all throughout high school, all throughout their teenage years, they practice, studied that particular instrument. I started with the upright bass when I was 18, after high school. So by the time we met in Graz, which was when I was 19, I had done this workshop with Auersp with Johannes, um, and I literally had been playing bass for maybe 3 months at the most. I was barely able to play like half position and hold the bow a little bit. And of course, Johannes was like, well, I don't know what to do with you, but if you keep it up, he must have heard something,
Exactly.
and his words were, if you keep it up for a year, if you work for a year on your own, I'll admit you next year, right? And so that was when I was 18. When I was 19, I was in Graz at the audition. That 1 year was spent practicing for 8 hours a day, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. That was
So
that
you
was my
went,
role.
you went in preparation with him. You were doing this on your own.
I was doing this on my own and with Mario Schott. I was doing the private lessons with Mario Schott. I might have had one lesson with Johannes shortly before the audition to sort of
Mm.
check in,
Mm.
but that was it. That was really it.
Mm.
Um, it was all on the line, and he was true to his word.
Mm.
He was absolutely true to his word. A year later, I had gained uh, enough knowledge of how to maneuver the bass, how to get around it to a certain degree, um, for him to say, okay, I'll take you on, right?
Mm.
He didn't need to do that, but he did it anyway.
Mm.
And needless to say, like it meant a lot, because as you well know, the educational system in Austria is completely different than over here or anywhere else, really. Studying is free. Let's not forget that. That's a huge thing. It is up to the teacher to say, I can teach this person, I cannot teach this person, right? And those decisions are really made on whether the teacher, if after the teacher evaluates your playing and says, okay, well, there is some like-mindedness, there is some room for growth that I can influence, that I can perhaps help establish, whatever, right? So my introduction to Johannes was the workshop in Oberschützen, where you, exactly as you just described, you go into his room and there are all these other badass bass players, badass classical players there, and they are flying through Bottesini. They're flying through Kosevitsky. There are Dragonetti, doesn't mean shit to them because they know how to do
Not only
this.
that, I mean, like Cesar Frank, Brahms,
Ev-
E minor,
ev-
unbelievable.
Everything, everything. And it is, your ears are on fire the minute you get there, not only because there's like clouds of smoke going through the room and all of that. And it's like you arrive there as a bass player, and my first impression was, um, I'm home. Never having met any of these other students, right? Never having met Auersberg as such. It was I'd rarely felt that sort of connection, you know. So it was very special from the get go. And he was true to his word. A year later, he admitted me to study with him. So, but then you had already studied. You already had a whole uh, student career as such, right? So the two of us were at different levels, obviously, right? Where I was still learning how to play the bass, still learning how to, go through all the positions and whatnot. You had done that already. So your work with him was completely different than the work that I did with him, even though eventually, came to the same conclusion, so to speak. Why don't you talk a little bit about Auersperg's teaching style? It's the audience kind of knows from me hinting at him a lot, but why don't you talk about what that included, what it meant, all of the, be as detail oriented as you want to be. Go.
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of this has been put together in my head, in hindsight, actually.
Right.
A
Right.
lot of the time you're working so hard on so many details and things that you don't, it's hard to work out. I mean, I didn't have a lot of headspace to like, what do I think of him?
Right.
It was
Right.
more like, what does he think of me?
Right. 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 Of course. Of course.
But it was I mean, some of it I was getting at the time. A lot of it came through hindsight. And this is what we were talking about on the phone when talking about this session. Was when you said that at the end of every lesson he would say, "Are you motivated?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this was his biggest talent as a pedagogue, was his ability to motivate. And this is not a sort of goes without saying kind of thing in the classical business, as you would know.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how many lessons or courses you did with other people, but I mean, I've been through the hardest of it in this scene, and people thinking about motivating their students or being motivational.
Right.
Is actually, even that in itself is rare. It's normally hard asses that either, take you to pieces or like at least back in the day, old school style, or just didn't really care that much.
Right. Right.
And he's really, that was very impressive, was his ability to motivate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was like, there was a couple of situations which I was really impressed by, where like there was one time we were rehearsing, Johannes and Alois gave this course together for the audition coming up that I won with the Vienna Film. And they decided to do a weekend together with his students and Johannes's students. But his students were mostly, with the exception of one, ex-Johannes students, like Georg Drake and all of these cats. But they decided to do this thing together, and it was great. And so we were all filled up in the practice rooms. Remember in Auersp, in those practice rooms down there on the ground level, and they decided that we will come to you,
right?
Like randomly, like we're all practicing like crazy, and we will come to you randomly, and then you will play for us. You don't have to come to us.
Wow.
And so I was working on the César Franck Sonata, the last movement, and I was not happy at all the way it was going. I was quite frustrated, and because I was completely taken to pieces by Alois and Johannes, but they were being hard on us, because it's a hard thing. And he walks into this room with these, you remember these big eyes that he would get when he was looking forward to something, and he's like eager, and he walks in. He's probably been listening outside the door for a little bit.
Yeah.
This sneaky bugger.
Exactly.
and he's walked in. He's got these big eager eyes, like, what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
What are you going to do for me today? And I was like, oh, okay, let's do it. I started to get into it, and immediately, just his presence, I was playing twice as good as before he walked into the room.
Yeah.
And this is highly unusual. This is really, in that, to be frank, I've never experienced anything like it.
Right.
And I had a few experiences like that with him. Or when he would, in a lesson, you know, when he'd sit down, he would accompany us, you know, a lot
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
time on
on
the piano,
piano. Yeah, yeah,
right? And he wasn't the best pianist,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But he was a great musician.
Right,
And so it didn't really matter, you know.
right, right.
And he would do this thing. You remember that thing that he always did when you were playing with him? And he'd go,
Yeah.
he'd whack his hip and throw his hand up in the air. That means that I didn't know what it meant, but it usually meant he was having a good time,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And
Totally, totally. Yeah.
and as soon as he'd like also playing alone first, and then he'd say, okay, let's play together. And then as soon as that would happen, things would get immediately better and everything would become clear.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and so that ability to motivate that he had just purely from his spirit, you know,
right,
this is not something you can learn.
right, right, right. No, this was coming from him. This was coming from him, and his complete devotion to the music and to the teaching, right? There was that I always felt that it was for me it was ground zero in terms of no BS, no bullshit.
No, no.
You go in and you play and you convey something and you communicate, right? And the more you communicate, the more his enthusiasm would grow, right? And if there was some sort of hindrance of communication within the music, right, then he would be, you know, very, very detail oriented. You know, I do remember his you know, almost fanatical uh, adherence to rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Like the rhythm of the melody needs to be 150%. There's just no two ways about that, right? Once you understand that, you know, the lyricism of a melody is really being brought to the forefront, right? But this importance of rhythmic perfection was tantamount, right? Um, at least that's what, you know. The other thing is also, and I wanted to just add this to what you just said with in terms of motivation. I know we talked about this previously, but in the 5-6 years that I studied with Johannes, there wasn't a single lesson that was the same. They were all different. Every lesson was completely unique, completely different, and they all finished with him saying, "Are you motivated?" That was exactly how this went. And no matter how you arrived at that lesson, and you know, I certainly ended up being there in various states of euphoria and despair, you know, throughout my time in Vienna. You always left motivated, and that was nothing else like that. This you know, and in with that motivation came your own self. How should I put this? You were motivated not because he told you to be motivated. You were motivated because you wanted to be. You see what I'm saying? Like this, you know, that was incredible, and he brought that out somehow. You know, he managed to, with the help of talking about music and the idea of this is about music. It made it so much clearer that this is what I want to do. You know, so it was an incredible. You know, words fail me, and I do get emotional thinking about it, especially since he's not around anymore. But it's, you know, I do want to point out to the audience the little bit of PR that I did for today's live video, which included pictures of Auersp, his wife Heidi Auersp, Tim. It included pictures of Auersp as a young man playing with a chamber music trio that included organ and trumpet. Who does that? And upright bass. I mean, it's mind-blowing in classical music terms, right? It included pictures of my last visit with Auersp in 2017, you know, where we they invited us over for dinner, and we had the best of times. It was clear that we perhaps wouldn't see each other again, but it was
When
it
was
was
that?
that was in 2017.
Okay.
I was there for a week, perhaps. I had to take care of some storage in Vienna. Um, so but it was always important for me to check in with him.
So you still saw
Um,
him when he was still healthy,
oh
basically, yeah?
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, considerably. He was already in. He was declining, but if you see that picture, I can send you that picture because
Oh,
know
I
I'm
think
fra-
you've sent it to me.
Okay.
Out in that little winter garden,
Yes,
having
yeah,
a
yeah,
beer.
yeah, and he's holding up a bottle, and he's
Yeah,
holding it up with the right hand, I believe, but he's like forming the perfect claw, like the perfect half.
typical,
It's-
typical,
it's-
typical, typical.
For those who are listening to this who don't know,
I have
like,
to look at that photo again.
yeah, the claw is the half position on the upright bass, right? And it looks somewhat like this. This is a half tone, and this is a half tone, right? And usually you form it with your left hand because if you're right-handed, you play your left hand is on the neck. He's holding up a bottle in that picture with the perfect claw, with this
That's
right
great.
hand, with
I
his
didn't notice
right
that.
hand. Yeah,
That's
this
funny.
it's a funny little detail. Let me just give you this other detail, and I thought this really kind of blew my mind a little bit during that visit. We were talking about continuing education, right? We were talking about that, the fact that I live now in the States, and whatever continuing education I do is basically on me, right? So, as such, the advent of the iPhone, uh, advent of apps, meant that there are also apps for ear training. There are apps for harmony and all of that stuff. So I showed him what I'm doing, like almost for a minute. I did that religiously in the subway here in New York, where I would put my headphones on and do ear training exercises in the subway, right? Um, so I showed him the app and clicked on it, and it played. I'll never forget that it played a scale because the idea is to identify a scale just by hearing it, right? It doesn't have to be the right key, but it has to be the right scale, mode, whatever, right? So I played him the scale without batting an eye. He's like, Phrygian. And he was totally right.
Right.
He was 80 something years old, definitely in the throes of his illness, but he was like, he didn't even flinch. And it's the same with Heidi. It was the same, like both of them. It was almost like one word that came out of their mouths. Phrygian. It was a Phrygian scale. The app happened to. It's totally random. They heard it immediately. They had dedicated their entire life to this. Um, it was incredible to be in their presence. There's just no two ways about that. Because again, like he was already retired at the time, right? He didn't like at some point, and as you well know, in the classical world in Vienna, it's very much okay. You perhaps this might be old school. This might have changed, since I left as well. But there is very much the idea of okay, well, you go into the orchestra, you stay there for 30, 40 years, and then you're kind of done, right? Um, with him, it was not with him and with Heidi Auersp. It was not that. It was a lifelong pursuit, and it would not stop just because the title or the job, required them to be finished with it. So it's really deep. I wanted to also let the audience know that you took over the teaching responsibilities at Oberschützen.
Yeah.
And maybe even before that, you auditioned for the Viennese Philharmonic Orchestra and you got in.
Yep.
That's correct, right?
Yep.
And then you took over the teaching job, the teaching position in Oberschützen. So you are actually in that room now, I believe. Is that right?
Yep.
Oh wow. Okay. So how do you follow someone like that? Like what was that like?
That was heavy.
Yeah.
That was heavy.
Yeah.
I didn't count on getting the job.
Mm.
I mean, one never does. usually. But I was definitely the underdog there. There was a guy from, I don't know, do you remember Josef Niederhammer?
By name.
Professor in Vienna.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Basically
yeah.
took Streicher's position.
Right, right.
And he was there as like a outsider. They always have an outsider on the panel.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, they also decided on who gets invited. And he saw me and said, oh, no, he's too young, doesn't have enough experience as a teacher and stuff like that. We don't need to invite him. And the head of the institute, which was still Klebel,
Yeah,
who you might remember, said, "Oh no, look, just let's give him a go so he knows how it is for the next time."
Right.
Because there was another person that was a favorite for the position, and he was being strongly favoritized.
Right.
And which was usually the case for these kind of positions. And usually the person who's being favoritized for the position is going to get it.
Right.
And it would have been a very good choice as well. He's a great pedagogue and a great bass player. And I was kind of the underdog. But so I got an invitation anyway. And then Josef said to me afterwards, like we were doing a gig together and we went for a beer and stuff. And he said, look, back then I actually said, you shouldn't be invited, because lack of experience in teaching. So he said, we knew you were going to play really well, but we had no idea that the teaching would go so well as well.
Oh, wow.
Because you play a recital, a short recital, like 40 minutes, and then you teach for another 40 minutes, 2 different students in front of a panel.
Wow.
And they didn't think that, they didn't expect that to go
as well as it did.
Right. And so in the end, I actually did get the job, and I was like, oh, wow, okay. So that was my back door out of the Vienna field, because I was having my issues there. But they got the job, so and realized, like, wow, I'm stepping into this amazing pedagogue shoes.
Right.
And it really freaked me out a little bit, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And in the beginning, I was really trying to do everything like he did, because he was so successful. And to put it in for the punters, like when we were studying with Hannes, that was possibly one of the best times ever studied with him, because his class was the strongest class by far.
Oh, wow.
In Austria. Like, they were winning all the auditions.
That's correct. Yeah.
They were winning all the auditions, at least getting really close in the last round.
Yeah.
Like the first audition I did with the Vienna Phil, I got to the 3rd round, and 4 of the 5 of us in the 3rd round were Auersp students. It was like Helmut Stockhammer, Gerhard Mutschpil.
Yeah.
Having also another interesting point is we're all Aquariuses.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
I don't know what that is, but Auersp was an Aquarius, I was an Aquarius, Simon Jäger was an Aquarius, Georg Strack was an Aquarius, Gerhard Mutschpil was an Aquarius, you're an Aquarius.
Yeah. Heidi is an Aquarius. Heidi's an Aquarius, I believe.
Yep.
We're all Aquarius, yeah. All of, like, I think he told me this once, like, for the 30 years that he was teaching, with the exception of a handful of his students. If it's 10 students, but for 30 years, they were all Aquarius. Every one of them.
Amazing.
Didn't matter where in the world. Okay.
A weird coincidence, but it's starting now that you say that, it's actually starting to make sense to me, because for him it was very important to connect with the person.
Yeah.
And at least we Aquarians always like to think that we're nothing like anybody else.
And we are. I mean, what are you talking about? Of course.
I'm not into this stuff normally, but there's been a few signs that I've been involved with over the years, and some of them do show sort of standard attributes. Koreans are the only ones that say that we don't have any standard attributes. No one's like us.
Nobody is. Okay.
Yeah,
This
we're
is
all
just
individuals.
yeah,
Yeah?
of course.
And and but in a sense, and that was actually the connecting thing in the end.
Right,
You know?
right, 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 right.
So that's an interesting thing. I never thought about that actually, but
Yeah, no, that's a
it's
real, yeah, that was a
he
real,
liked these individuals,
yeah,
and he liked to get inside into your soul and stuff, and work you out, because
yeah,
basically making music is a very intimate thing,
right,
and playing music, and even though it's a cliche, I understand that, but I do actually believe in it, that it is, the way to express yourself without words, and in a very intimate form of communication.
oh
Playing
yeah,
is one of them.
yeah, yeah,
And but me coming from Australia, being an Anglo-Saxon,
right,
my thing was just like, no, you're my bass teacher,
right,
and
right,
that's it.
right, right,
My personal life is mine, and
mm,
my whatever
right,
is
right,
mine.
right,
You're not grabbing it. I could feel him. I could see him trying to sort of get in there,
get
you know?
in, yeah, 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 yeah,
And I blocked it for
mm,
about a year or so,
check that out, okay,
and until I realized, like, well, but we really like one another and we actually get on really well. So why am I doing this?
yeah,
And
yeah, 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 yeah,
sometimes he'd just say, we'd get into a discussion about something like Scientology or something, or
right,
anything,
right, right,
and he'd go, oh yeah, put the bass down, let's talk,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And I let it go, and I let him in, and then from that point on, it just accelerated. My own personal learning curve just accelerated,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
because I let him in, and let him mess about with me.
right, 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 right.
Um,
No,
but
that was definitely just not. I don't want to interrupt you, but
no, no,
that was
no.
definitely the sort of the he was looking for the lock of your soul,
Good point.
right? And
Mm.
once he found that lock, he found the key within himself somehow to unlock your soul, all right? And he used that unlocking to get the music out,
Yeah,
right? That
exactly.
again communicated without words on a almost purely emotional level. And again, like emotions can, there's a variety of emotions. There's a universe of emotions within all of us, right? And but he was of the opinion to get all of that out, right? And make it under. And this is an important point. Make it understandable to the audience. You had to let go. You had to open up. You had to
Mm-hmm.
be really clear about your own feelings of whatever they might be, right? Um, you had to, yeah, open up. You had to, unlock your soul, basically. And that was remarkable. That was just remarkable. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I now I take that for granted, right? Um, but yeah, that was a big part. That was a big part of his thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, going back to your original question
Mm-hmm.
about what was it like to step into his shoes, or at least that's the way I understood the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was scary, and I tried to be like him,
Mm.
as much as possible. And he was still very much involved as
Right,
well. He continued
right,
to be very much involved. He said, "Look, if you ever need any help," and I would get him in to
right,
teach my students and stuff. But sometimes if I was on tour or something, then I'd I'd get him in to take over for me and stuff. But the most important thing, well, the two most important things for me in that exercise was first of all, my students getting, a lot of them came from him already because I took over the class,
right,
but there are a lot of other newer ones that didn't know him that well, and to get that inspiration from him, and that special thing that he had,
right,
but also we would again get together. I'd go around to his place, we'd have a coffee or a beer or something, and
mm.
he'd tell me all what he thought,
Right,
and what he thought I should do better, and what he thinks he's doing well, and blah, blah, blah. And this is like extremely important, like as a teacher, because as a teacher, you don't get any feedback, you know, and no one's getting up and applauding or
Oh
anything
wow.
like that, you
Oh
know.
wow. Yeah.
You
Yeah. You're
just got to have
totally right. You're so right. Yeah. Yeah.
faith in what you're doing. And I mean, I try to listen to a lot of other teachers as much as I can, whenever I can, to get new ideas. But that was very important for me to get that feedback. And a lot of the time, we didn't completely agree either. You know, he would
Okay.
say, "Oh, you know, like what you're doing here, I'm not really convinced by it." I was like, "Yeah," but I realized more and more through these discussions, we are different people. I can't do it exactly the way he did. Of course, I'm using his inspiration and a lot of his pedagogical techniques or exercises that he would give for people and stuff. Um, of course, I use a lot of those, and of course, I base so much of it on the motivation and this passion
Yeah.
that he had. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I realized at some point I'm a different person. I can't do it the way he does
Of course.
it.
Of course.
You know, and so I
But
studied.
maybe, you know, maybe it took all of these measures for you to come to the realization that, okay, well, if I just copy exactly what he did, you know, we're only going to get so far. But
It's not
if
going to be convincing because it's not me anyway. You know.
exactly. So, but if I take what he did and build on it based on my personality, on my, you know, character as a pedagogue, you know, then we're really taking it a step further, right? And then we're really continuing his line of thinking. Because one thing that I wanted to bring this up with you, because it's my understanding, he didn't um, he didn't repeat himself from one student to the next. In other words, what he taught you and how he taught you was totally 100% for you. What?
Can I bring up a story
Yeah,
like
yeah,
along those
sure,
lines? Sorry to
sure.
interrupt.
No, 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 no. Go for it. Go
Because
for it.
this is one thing that really sticks in my mind. First of all, I mean, like I was mentioning before, his magnitude in being able to motivate and bring you to another level that you didn't realize was
Yeah,
in you.
yeah,
Um, but also that particular one about every lesson was tailor made for
yeah,
each person. You know?
yeah,
And I sat in, and there was one day I was fortunate enough, and it was in August, I'm pretty sure, and it was most of the really good cats then in the
mm,
class,
mm,
and there were 4 people in one day that played Van Hal concerto.
mm.
4 people, they all played the first movement,
Right.
right? Not one single sentence was repeated. Not one. Exactly the same piece, four
Right.
times in a row with 4 different students.
Right. Right.
And this really blew my mind. I just say,
How is
how
that even
good is that
possible?
for really being able to tailor make
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
a
Yeah. No, this
lesson
is
and forming a student completely within that student's personality and that fits that student's personality.
yeah.
It was really possibly the most impressive things I've ever seen when it comes to teaching.
Right. Right.
It
Right.
really
No,
was.
I totally agree. And I was at those. I was at not at that particular lesson, but I was at those lessons as well. When you just in the not in the driver's seat, but in the seat next to the driver, and you're just observing this, and you're sitting there, you're taking. I certainly didn't take notes in a notebook or anything, but you listened. Exactly, it was all up here. You listened, and you got inspired, and there was this complete giving up of self, not in a bad way, right? But basically opening yourself up so information could come in, right? Um, and that was that was it, it was tailor made. Every lesson was tailor made for that particular lesson, for that particular student. Um, there was a continuing thread that he kept throughout your time with him, from the beginning to the end, right? He could always go back to say, well, we 2 years ago we talked about this particular thing, technicality of playing, this particular aspect of playing, be it intonation, be it right hand bowing, structure, whatever it might be, right? It was that it always seemed to me as if he had like this almost like a computer who, with folders for each student in his head, and in his, essentially in his soul, really, and in his heart. And whenever he was with that particular student, he would grab into that folder and get all the details that he needed to motivate that particular student, right? It was the most remarkable thing. And again, like for just, I need to repeat that for the audience. Like, we are talking about classical music. We're talking about, classical upright bass literature, right? But in a larger sense, we're talking about music. We're talking about
We're just
music.
talking about music.
We're
That's
talking
all he ever talked about.
exactly,
That's all it.
exactly. We're talking about music and music education, and becoming a musician, regardless of what style, of what genre, of whatever. I'm gonna jump further because we've already been on for an hour now. I'm gonna jump a little.
Time flies, baby.
Yeah, it sure does. It's this. I'm also trying not to be too nostalgic about this, because I see his.
It's hard not to be.
It is hard not to be. It is hard not to get emotional. It's, I feel myself getting misty as I'm listening to you. I was like, when I put the PR, the promotional material together, you sent me the in memoriam letter. Like, I was.
Oh, that concert, that was a university orchestra concert that happened about a week after he died. And I asked the head of our institute if he possibly do something, maybe dedicate the concert to him.
Right.
And which he did, and he himself is a musicologist, and so he got into the research and looking through all of the stuff to find information.
Right.
And he when he was giving the speech at the concert, I had to do everything to stop myself from breaking down in tears.
Yeah. No, I remember.
Very much.
I remember the 2017, the last visit with him. My partner Alexis was with me, and they had met, years prior. Again, also in Vienna, and we're leaving, and he gives me a hug, and I tell him, this is I'm totally sidestepping here, but I tell him, well, I knew that he was sick. I mean, you couldn't not know. But we never talked about it, and it was also not like, that was just not important at the moment, right? What was important was being together and having and getting the most out of the time that we had together, right?
And you were so close. You guys were so close in different ways as well, because I know that. I mean, Johannes and I talked about you as well a lot, because I would go around there a couple of times a year, and we'd sit down and have a coffee and have a good chat and stuff like that. And you came up very often in the conversation. You just had to go through with your I don't know how to put this.
No, go for it. Don't.
He knew your family situation.
Oh yeah.
And the hardships that you went through there, and went through a lot of that with you, and that was the beautiful thing with him as a person. You could really go to him about anything.
Yeah, no doubt. So just I'll get to that in a second. The last time I saw him, and I tell him, well, half in jest, half totally serious, next time New York, okay? And he's like, well, I'll see if I can make it. He was like, don't count on it. I'll see what I can do, if I can hold on, or I said something like, okay, well, I'll see you next year or something like, and he was like, I'll see if I can hold on that long, and we left the house in Pötzensdorfer Straße, and I was wiped. I wasn't necessarily out. I didn't break down on the street or anything, but it took a lot to, walk down the street, because it was such a thing. And to, on the subject of my history with him, I while studying in Vienna with him, my family disintegrated. That's just what happened.
Mm.
And that's, as such, is not is was a terrible thing that I had to live through. Um, he never, and I am so grateful for that. He never attempted to fill the void that was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, within my life, right? Because all these people were either dying or due to substance abuse, just leaving my life, right? He never attempted to fill that void. He was like, I am your teacher. I'm not your substitute family. I'm not your substitute dad or anything like that. I am your teacher, and as such, I'm gonna be the best teacher that I can possibly be, right? And as long as you keep it together, I will teach you, right? I will convey all my information and all my energy into this endeavor of teaching you. And that was for many years the only constant in my life. That was it. That was it. There was nothing. There was nothing else because everything else fell away, right? So I'm forever indebted to him.
Well, I mean, you say that he never attempted to fill a void, but I honestly think that he was doing that, even though he wasn't attempting that.
Exactly. No, that's exactly my point. Like he never went like you're gonna be like he never went to something that happens over here. Since there is a cultural difference where you become family or anything like that.
But okay, no,
we
but
we became family,
yeah,
right? We
but
became family, but in the understanding that I'm going to teach you,
yeah,
right?
but he actually when Georg died,
Right,
and for the listeners out there, Georg Straka was we studied together
right.
at the same time with you and me,
Yeah, yeah,
and he was like one of the top cats in the class.
yeah,
He already had a job in the Mozarteum Orchestra in Salzburg, and he won the next audition after me. An amazing person,
mm,
great person, great bass player.
right,
And when he died suddenly, he fell off Mount Fuji
yeah.
after fighting off a brain tumor
I mean,
successfully.
yeah,
And it's just a freak accident.
right,
Um, and, of course, I was talking to Auersp about it later times, but of course at the funeral as well, which was horrific.
yeah,
Because he was like in his early 40s.
right,
Same age as me, another
yeah,
Aquarius.
yeah. Just you guys are just a little older than I am.
Uh,
Yeah,
and Alsbeck just said to me, Hannes just said to me, they're all like my children. This is when
yeah,
like my own child dies.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
that's what we were for him. We were
yeah.
all his children, those that let him in,
Right, right, right,
you know.
right, 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 right.
And once you
No,
let
it's
him in, the sky was the limit.
yeah, yeah, because he was able to rearrange your being, your aesthetic, your choice, your process of choice making when it comes to music. We make choices. We phrasing is nothing else but a series of choices, right? Dynamics is a very very clear cut choice, one way or the other. Um, in order to get all of that out of you, he had to open you up basically and put it and just open it up and show you the possibilities of this is how you can express yourself, right? And there's one thing that I wanted to get back to, and that was which I found so fascinating with him was his among the many other things that we already talked about, his eye and ear towards the audience, right? His understanding of, okay, well, we are playing music and we are enjoying this very much, but we also have an audience that we need to communicate with, right? That we're trying to put, like, we're trying to communicate, what's the word I'm looking for? Convey emotions and expressions to an audience, right? I thought that thought in and of itself is, I mean, revolutionary in classical terms.
Yeah, for sure.
It really is. It really is. Like in
Well, it's certainly
classical.
putting it in those words. I mean, those for the greats, that is something that is like goes without saying, and is somehow in the back of their minds or in their
Right.
spirit and stuff like that. But to put it in those, put it into words is a completely different story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because all of a sudden you are committed to expressing yourself. You're committed to making sure the audience understands what you are trying to convey with a piece of music. It is absolutely, it floored me at the time. And he came back to it like several times. Like I played with the Jeunesse Musicale Youth Orchestra, right? Where I was in bass sections. And then I also did the solo studies with him, right? And it didn't matter. It was important for him to make sure to say, this is, we need to get this point across to the audience. And if we don't get it across to the audience, then what are we doing this for?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, this was something that was like, I mean, I was talking to some students about it recently. Or not recently, actually, I hammered into them. They must be, I'm boring them into submission, actually. I'm not. But the and I think these are the things that I'm carrying on from him, but just in my own way. I can't be like him, and I can't explain things like him, and I can't tailor make lessons like him, and I can't motivate like him.
Right.
Like him in different ways, but not that way. And that was, and like I was saying to some students recently, is like, you've got to, if you don't, you have to absolutely live it within yourself. Like this phrase, the atmosphere that you want to convey, the picture that you want to give. It might be a picture, it might be a landscape, it might be a person, it might be a conversation, it might be a scene in the theater, whatever.
Right.
That whatever you want to convey, you have to live it completely.
Right.
It has to come completely from in here. If you're not convinced by it, they're not going to be convinced by it. If you're scared on stage, they're going to feel it.
Yeah.
If you're not having a good, if you have a good time, they're going to have a good time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Right? This is an interesting thing with sorry to just to interrupt you real quick, but with the upright bass, at least in my opinion, right? With the bass, there is this thing of exaggerating dynamics, just to make sure that the audience really gets it. Yep. Right. So that's just as an example of all of that.
Yeah. And the other thing was, and so moving on from that, and this was also something that I did actually get from him in particular. I said, we have to be like actors. You have to dive into the role. You have to completely dive into the role. And, like the great actors, when they just like completely dive into that role.
Oh yeah.
And research and do all of these things, and to make it as convincing as possible. It's like you do it from just a purely intellectual point of view.
Right.
That's exactly what they're going to get. They're going to get this intellectual thing.
Right. Right.
If you're not feeling it, they're not going to get it.
Right.
And whatever you feel on stage, they will feel.
Right. Right. And I have to point that out to the audience. Like again, like in classical education, that is unheard of. Okay, that is unheard of. That to be so detail oriented, to be so not only detailed in the minutia of what the various ingredients are of what you're doing, left hand, right hand, coordination, dynamics, notes, intonation, up bow, down bow, whatever it might be, right? But to be so detail oriented in the emotional makeup of a particular piece, and it didn't matter to him whether it was a soloist piece or whether it was an orchestral study, right? It was all about being so detailed and making sure that whatever you're trying to convey is being put out there 150%, so that everybody understands it, right? It was the most remarkable thing, because at least in my limited interaction, and again, like my interaction with the classical world was not the biggest at when I got to him. By the time I left, it was huge. Um, I didn't hear anybody else talking like that.
No,
Like it
no.
just
And
didn't.
I still haven't.
Yeah,
And I
there
still
you go.
haven't.
There you go. There you go. So it didn't really exist, you know. There was one moment, and I also want to share that with the audience and share it with you. There are two moments that I want to share. First of all, the only time when Johannes actually got cross with me, which was remarkable, which was absolutely remarkable. I never heard him get cross with anybody else, right? I never heard him like, and here's what I mean by that. I hadn't done something, or I was not performing up to where I was supposed to be performing. Um, and the only thing that he said, he looked me straight in the eye. You know, he was very, 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 very clear, very clear. And he was like, "You need to understand one thing." He was pointing at himself. "I'm sitting here. You're sitting over there. I have a job.
Yeah.
I sit here. You're sitting there." That was it. That was it. That was the only time he ever. I don't. To this day, I don't even know whether that was him being cross or whether that was him being just disappointed or
No,
whatever.
no.
That was
That was
just
just basically him putting it to you flat.
yeah. He was
This
he
is the
was
reality, baby.
yeah, like whatever you think is happening, whatever you think you're doing, you need to understand I'm sitting here. Which was
I had like a similar situation, like with this student when he was like arguing with me. We were talking about his diploma, his final recitals and what should be on the program, and I was like, I'm not so sure about this. And, oh, you're always a negative and da da da. And, you know, and like there was always this conflict with him, but he was a very challenging student.
right.
And I just took him outside and pointed to the name on the door, and I said, "Whose name is that?" Um, but the thing is, what Hannes actually did throw me out twice.
Oh wow. Oh, check that out.
He
Okay.
threw me out.
Oh
He
wow.
threw me out. But it was in that first semester where I was saying I was quite depressed and I didn't really know what was going on. And I didn't
Right.
know any German. And
Right.
everybody
Right.
seemed so much better. And I fell into this depression in this small village.
Right.
And it was all a little bit too much. And I thought I was above it, but I wasn't.
Right.
But he threw me out a couple of times, like much later, many years later, like after I was studying with him and was with the field and blah blah blah, and ran at his place having a coffee or whatever. I brought it up, and I brought it up a couple of times. And he said, "No, I never did that. I never did that." And I said, "You did, and I deserved it, man. I was lazy."
Yeah. No, I mean, he, with as much as an encouraging, nurturing individual as he was, he understood very well. He was a pedagogue, like through and through. He understood exactly what you needed at what time, right? And at the time, I needed to hear that. Listen, dude, I have a job.
Yeah.
So if you want to, this is on you. This whatever this resistance, or I don't remember, for the life of me, I don't remember what the details of it was, but I do remember him saying, "I'm sitting here." that was all that was needed. And the second thing that I wanted to bring up, and that was when we did that, we did a concert with the Hochschulorchester, with the orchestra of the academy, right? And you were a principal player. You were very gracious to invite me to sit next to you on the first stand. There were, I believe, 4 stands, which makes it like 8 bass players.
Possible, yeah, I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there was the first stand, the second, the third, and then the 4th stand. And Hannes, Johannes, and Posch took the 4th stand, right? So they were playing they were the last of the bass section, right? The two of us, we were the first of the bass section. So for those who don't know orchestral music that well, when you're in a section, you follow the section leader, right? In terms of phrasing, in terms of dynamics, in terms of when to come in, when, how long to hold certain things, the the information gets transferred from the conductor to the principal bass players, and from the principals to the other members of that particular section.
In the best sense, sometimes we have to sort of interject and do things verbally because it's such a big apparatus.
Of course.
Because we are responsible. The first is responsible for the artistic quality of that group.
Exactly. So Johannes Auersp and Alois Posch, his famous student, principal bass player at the Viennese Philharmonic, take the fourth stand, which means that they are the very last, right? The two of them were louder than the six of us.
Yeah.
Which was incredible to witness. I've never, when we're talking about an orchestra, you're talking about anywhere between, it can be 40 to 90. I've played in an orchestra with 200 people. It can be a large apparatus of a lot of people, right? You don't necessarily always hear everything. When you're trying to be in a section, you're supposed to sound like one instrument. So, you could make the point of you're not supposed to hear everybody. You're supposed to hear one sound. The two of them were so strong in their execution, in their playing, in their concept of I don't remember what we did.
Mahler 1.
Say again?
Mahler's First Symphony.
Mahler's First Symphony. There we go. All right. They were so strong. They overpowered in the best possible way. They blew everybody away from all the way back in the fourth on the fourth stand, which was an incredible experience. As whatever he was talking about in terms as philosophical, as concept oriented as it was firmly rooted in a practical application of what he was talking about in making music. And that was just him basically showing, okay, I can still do this.
Yeah, well, this is something that I learned from that situation actually. That whenever I tutor youth orchestras, and sometimes with the uni orchestra as well, I get in there and I play with them in the hope that I can do that.
Right.
And this is how it's done, because up until that point, it's all abstract, because we're playing function most of the time.
Right. Right.
And the solo repertoire is great to get fit and further yourself and stay fit, or to get a job or whatever. But it's completely different to what we actually do in the job.
Right. That's true.
And so when talking about it, like working on orchestral excerpts and bits, it's completely abstract.
Right.
So you have to get in the middle of it and say, this is why you do the pits this way. This is why you do that way, and stuff. And hopefully without words.
Right.
If you're doing it okay.
Right.
You're doing it well. So, and that's something that I certainly took from that experience as well. And I remember it very well. It was a Jubilee concert. It was in 1995.
Yeah.
And that photo that I sent to you with Auersp and myself and Hyde, that was after that concert.
Oh wow, beautiful. No, that's
why I was looking like a Holocaust survivor. If that's not offensive to anybody.
It's terrible.
Because it was just after I'd done the audition, and I was just like,
that's what I thought. It looked like you had that post audition. I've just left it all on the line. I left it all on the mat, as they say. You have that look in that picture where it's just like, okay, I'm drained. This is it. This. I need to refuel one way or the other. But I just left it all on the line, so to speak.
It was also a very happy time. I mean, my parents were there. They took that photo, and it was a very exciting time.
Yeah, and it's
Really exciting
noticeable.
time.
Like you see it in his face. Again, for the audience who's watching, like check out the artwork that I put out for this live video. You see it in his face, like the pride that he shows. You know, you see it in Heidi's face, the joy that happened because of this all this happening and this it's you know I remember looks like that very very well. And that's that you know it was perfect description of the relationship that you two had, that I thought was also just very very unique and magical to a certain degree. And
Mm.
this it's not a coincidence that you are now teaching over there. That's you know
Yeah, yeah,
that's that's
yeah.
pretty deep.
Well, it was certainly always to this day is an enormous privilege
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
to be sitting in his chair
yeah.
and trying to continue the work, not in the same way, obviously, like as we spoke before. Um, it can't be done in exactly the same way, but it's an
Yeah.
enormous privilege, an enormous honor. Sorry, that's the best. That's the better word that I was looking for.
Yeah,
Enormous
for
honor.
sure. For sure, for sure. Well, listen, team, thank you so much for being here today, for making yourself available. I truly appreciate it. I hope that we were able to sort of convey to the audience, and I think that we were able to do that, of what how great of a teacher this guy really was, and how important it is to have a teacher, to have someone like that in your life. It doesn't have to be this particular thing. It doesn't have to be classical music. It doesn't. It just happened to be that thing for us. Obviously our lives have, you know, went into different directions. You're in Austria. I'm in the States now. You came from Australia. There's a lot of moving around. That is perhaps a parallel.
Not a lot
Nevertheless,
lately.
say again.
Not a lot lately. Not a lot of
Nevertheless,
moving around lately.
yeah, well, yeah. Now lately, it's like we are standing still. Okay,
Yeah.
we're not moving. That's just what it is. But I want to say thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts, sharing your history with Johannes. It was this was an incredible individual who profoundly just influenced so many people. How do you do that? You need to really know yourself, but that was his thing, and he took that upon himself. So once again, I thank you for being here today. I think this means the world to me. I hope the audience, people who are we have quite a few people staying. So I hope the audience was able to get something out of it. This goes beyond the. We're not going to. When I kind of conceptualized this live video, I was like, well, we're not going to talk about scales. As important as they are, we're not going to talk about scales or arpeggios or chords or anything like that. But we are going to talk about this teacher taking on the
No,
responsibility
I'm
of
very glad. I'm very glad that that we could take it on that level, and it happened by itself.
yeah
The just him as a person, him as a pedagogue,
yeah
one of the strongest teachers of the latter half of the 20th century in this particular area in
oh yeah
Central Europe, um, without a doubt,
yeah
without a doubt.
yeah
And I thank you very, very much for the invitation.
of course of course
And um, it's been a gas, and it's
yes
great to see you too, man.
yeah same here you see this for the audience we we put this together. I gotta share this text exchange which was I went to the barber to get a haircut. Okay, this is a couple months ago, and I texted Tim and let him know, listen, I'm thinking about doing this. And he immediately wrote back to me, and I was sitting at the barber's chair, receiving your text, and I was like, listen, I can't really talk right now because we wanted to talk about this beforehand. Um, I'm getting a haircut, and your reply was, what hair? Which was what you did, left me speechless. Like, what hair? This isn't.
What's the point, man? I
What's the
mean,
point?
don't you have a machine at home? Fuck, really?
No, there's two things that I don't do. I don't change my own strings, and I don't give myself haircuts. That's just
You don't change your own strings,
I
you
don't.
princess.
Yes, I don't change my own strings. There is
You
no.
princess.
Absolutely, and I'm totally owning that. Okay, I'm not changing strings. Period. It's I don't even change strings on the electric bass. What can I say? I don't do that. It's not in me. I don't want to. Anyway, on that note, listen, Tim Dunin, thank you so much. I am going to, if that's okay with you, I'm going to put up links to your YouTube channel. There's a number of solo recitals out there on YouTube that I think people need to hear. That are beautiful and sort of showcase also in a way showcase the playing, the teachings of Auersberg. Um, I think that's so people have a better understanding of what it is we're talking about. And I wish you all the best, of course. Stay safe out there. Stay safe back in Vienna. Stay sane as much as possible. And I hope that in the not so distant future, we'll open up again and be able to go for a beer or something like that.
Oh,
I think
I
that would
hope
be
so, mate. I really, really hope so. Thank you, mate. It's been great. It's lovely to
awesome.
see you.
Please
And
say,
I hope
give my love to Heidi Auersberg. Give my love to everyone I
as
know.
soon as this comes out on YouTube, let me know,
Yeah, yeah, most
and
definitely.
I'll send it to Heidi.
Oh yeah, yeah, please do.
And it's been great to see you, mate. And I hope that we can stay in contact.
Yeah, we will. All right, you take care
Okay,
now.
man.
All right,
Cheers.
later.